What is up, YouTube? So today we are talking about everything there is to know about in-ear monitors and how to get a good in-ear monitor mix in a live situation. Before we jump into any specifics about how to get a good in-ear monitor mix, it's really important to say that your mix can really only be as good as your in-ears. So there are definitely a bunch of universal in-ears out there that range from terrible sounding to good sounding. I know Shure makes some good universal ears. Universal ears means that, anyone can take those in-ears, put them in, good to go. You might have to change the size of the foam that's on there, but anyone can use them. Great. Custom molded in-ears are really the way to go if you can afford it, because of a couple reasons. One, they provide a ton of isolation. You don't have to turn the in-ears up because they actually cut out so much noise. I think my in-ears custom molded and they cut out, I think, like 30 decibels, which is a ton, which means no matter, even if the drivers in there, the speakers that were in the headphones were terrible, I would still be getting a better mix than a lot of people because I'm not having to turn it up as much and I have more ability to, tweak what I can because I hear everything better. But on top of that, as drummers, I would say that it's really nice to have 3 drivers in each ear. So they make single drivers, they make dual drivers, they make 3 drivers, 4 drivers, 5 drivers, 12 drivers. Drivers just means speakers, and a lot of triple drivers are when you really start getting nice low end. Dual drivers, some of them can be nice as far as low end, but because drums are such a wide spanning instrument, we have a bunch of cymbals that are in the higher range and a bunch of kick drum stuff and floor toms that are in the lower range. We span the kind of gamut. So the more dynamic range and frequency range that your in-ears have, the better off you'll be. So if you can get triple drivers that have a good frequency response at lower registers, that's really best case scenario. I'll go into how we can get a good mix in our in-ears as far as like what we need in our ears in a second. But before I get to that, I want to go over 3 different ways that you might actually get sound to your in-ears, because as a lot of if you don't tour with a band that has a monitor world set up where a monitor engineer is running your ears, you might think, well, like, when would I ever use in-ear monitors, because I don't travel with a band that has an in-ear rig. But there's a lot of instances. A lot of churches use Aviom systems and you get to mix yourself there. And then a lot of like festivals you go to will have in-ears for whoever wants them. In Nashville, there are a lot of live venues that mix ears depending on whether you want wedges or in-ears. So sometimes the venue you're playing has the ability to run ears. But there's also a couple ways to like run in-ear mixes yourself and kind of DIY it. So the first is obviously the in-ears are provided. There's either a dedicated monitor engineer who's running ears for people and giving you belt packs and whatever, or you're at a church and they have an Aviom system where you can, tweak yourself and it comes from this little box that sits next to you. So that's the first way, and that's definitely the easiest way because that means that someone has purposely thought about, okay, we want to get in-ears to people, this is how we can do it. The second way is you can bring a mixer, like a little standalone mixer, and you can ask the monitor engineer to run you an XLR line, because most wedges that sit on the ground that are like on stage monitors, most of those take XLR inputs to deliver sound to that speaker. So what you can do is you can say, hey, can I unplug this XLR and plug it into my mixer? I want to be able to hear stuff in my in-ears, and they can run XLR lines to your mixer, and then you have the ability to mix up and down, and you can plug your headphones into the headphone output, and there you go. I will caution you that this is not ideal because some engineers don't really want to deal with that. They don't want to unplug the cable from the speaker to put it in your mixer. And additionally, they, maybe they don't really know how to mix ears and they send something way too loud to you. It blows your ears out. Like, you just want to be really careful when you do this that, you have control, that you're running the volume super, super low so that if something happens, feedback or whatever, since the setup was never really meant for in-ears and you're kind of DIYing it, you just want to be cautious and careful. Don't be too much of a diva. Worst comes to worst, just use the wedges. But, if you really, really, really want in-ears, you can set up a mixer, get a mix XLR sent from front of house that has, everything that they would be sending to a stage wedge. And then from there, you can, send yourself a click track, and now you have independent control over the mix front of house is sending you and, your mix of your iPod or whatever you're running, your iPhone. iPod. Who uses iPods anymore? But then you can run a mix of, the separate XLR for your full mix of what the front of house is sending you, and then you can send, you have control over your mix of the click track and what you're sending yourself. And the third way you can run ears to yourself is with an interface. And there's a lot more control over this. There's a couple ways you can do this. When I play live, I use the Sapphire, the Focusrite interfaces, and they have a really nice app called the Sapphire Mix Control, where you can kind of plug as many inputs as you want into your interface and then control what you send yourself. So oftentimes when I'm running backing tracks, I'll run them from Ableton, and that'll be its own thing in the Sapphire Mix Control, and then on top of that, I'll have them run me an XLR line, and that's its own thing, and I can kind of mix and match what I want from my interface. And the nice part about this is I can not only mix it for myself, which is good because I can have click and tracks and then whatever they send me, and I'm messing with it and mix control and whatever, but I can also send this out to other bandmates. So if we need to run click to certain people, I can run that out of the interface, and I have a bunch of control. So those are kind of the three ways. In-ears are provided. You have your mixer that you're bringing that you can, set up and whatever, do that, or you have an interface which you can run ears to yourself through that. All of it kind of hinges on the setup, what the venue is willing to work with you on, what they're not, what they have there, what they don't. So, as you go on and you travel more and whatever, you might find that, I always need this adapter in this situation and this adapter and whatever. But it's something to play with, The more information you can find out about a venue and what they provide, the more chances you'll have your rig actually work for in-ears. But sometimes it's more hassle than it's worth, if you're not running tracks to everyone and, it's just for backing track for yourself or whatever, and that's why you want ears. There are other ways to have click track or whatever. Those are the three different ways you can kind of monitor yourself. Let's now talk about in-ears, what we put in them, how to get stuff sounding good. Most people have this conception that, their headphones, you're getting everything from the board and it's controlled and EQ'd, so it should sound like a record in your ears. And in my experience, it's never gonna sound like a record in your in-ears. It's just not. That's just not the way it works. That's not, it's just not the way it works. So I always say get what you absolutely need first and have that be set so that there's no mistakes about it. There's no problems. There's no, if everything drops out, those basis of what you build your mix around can get you through the show. And then past that, you salt and pepper from there and add a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but only add what you absolutely need. If there's 3 guitar players on stage and one of them is doing most of the harmonic stuff and the other 2 are just kind of there for effects and stuff, maybe don't put all 3 guitar players in your ears, because the more stuff you add to your ears, the more likelihood that the guitar player turns himself up after the 3rd song and now he's super loud and now that's all you can hear in your mix. The more stuff you introduce into your ears, the more variables and the more likelihood that there's going to be some kind of problem that happens. So the first thing that I get in my in-ears is click and tracks. If we're running click and tracks, I need that absolutely 1,000,000%. I'm a drummer. Everyone, whether they should or not, click tracks there. Everyone should be the timekeeper, but the drummer is really running the ship. So I need click and tracks above anything else because I need to be locked into that stuff more so than anyone else on stage. So click and track comes first, and that's probably going to be the loudest thing in my mix because I want to make sure that no matter what happens, they flip the wrong vocal mic on and now BGVs are the loudest thing in my mix, or bass guitar, the DI was kind of shorting out and then halfway through the set it randomly clicks on and it's twice as loud as it was. I want to make sure that no matter what happens, I will have click track loudest in my ears. The next thing I want is bass guitar. As a drummer, it is our responsibility to lock in with the bass player. So I need to be able to hear the bass player. I need to hear what his bass patterns are. I need to lock it in with my kick drum, and I just absolutely need bass guitar in my in-ears right after click track. Third is vocals, and I don't necessarily need a ton of vocals, but I do need to be able to hear them at all times because vocals are how I mark where I am in a song, and vocals are also, when people are talking in the middle of the set, I need to be able to hear those vocals so that when they say, and here's song so-and-so, I need to be able to count that off right away. And if I can't hear vocals, I'll be missing count-offs, and I'll also, if we're on the 3rd course, and we have 2 tags at the end of that course, and I can't hear vocals, maybe I don't realize that they actually skipped the tags by accident and we're going right to the outro. If I don't have vocals, I won't know that, you know. So click, bass, vocals. And then next, I want a little bit of drums. I want kick drum and snare drum most of all because I want to be able to hear those things, and then a little bit of overheads. But I don't want a ton of drums in my mix. Drums kind of just dominate everything. I do want drums, and I want to be able to hear everything, but I don't want it to be like a drum mix. I still want to hear click, bass, and vocals more, and then come drums. And then after all of that stuff, those are the necessities. I can play a whole show with just those 4 things: click, bass, vocals, and a little bit of drums. But beyond that, I'm gonna look at the stage and say, who is the harmonic instrument that's playing the most, that's giving me the most information? What I mean by harmonic instrument is an instrument that's playing chords. So drums don't play chords, basses don't play chords, not usually. So keyboard players, guitar players, who is playing chords the most and the most accurately? Sometimes in certain situations, just because they're the lead guitar player, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're strong or that they always know the tunes that well. If you're playing with a band that you don't usually play with, you know, it's always my job to sit down and say, okay, who is reading these charts the best? Who is playing these chords? The piano player. Maybe the guitar player is playing chords, but he doesn't really get the form. He didn't write great charts, so I don't want a ton of him in my ears because I don't know if he's actually going to be right. But it seems like the keyboard player seems like he really knows what he's doing. He really knows the song forms. I want him in my ears because now I'm getting a lot of chords, which is going to help me also know where the song is and where we are in the song. And then after that, it's just, you know, adding who I want and who I don't want. So maybe there's 2 guitar players and one of them is just doing ambient stuff. I don't necessarily need that. All that's going to do is clutter up my mix. So I'll take the lead guitar player, get him a little bit, so now I can hear his soloing. So when, you know, we're playing and he's soloing, I can react to it. I can play with him. You know, I get the dynamics and where we're going and how long we want to solo. But it's really from there, it's just kind of who do I want, who don't I want? And then a last note is panning. I think it's really important to pan your in-ears. Most people just kind of have everything right up the center, but when you do that, you really lose a lot of clarity and it's harder to hear everything because everything's right down the center. So what I usually do is I take click track, bass, and vocals right down the center, snare drum, kick drum right down the center, overheads panned hard, toms panned left, right, hi-hat panned left. Guitars, if there's a stage right and a stage left guitar, I'll pan the stage right guitar right, I'll pan the stage left guitar left. If there's keyboards, I'll try to get those panned. If there's background vocalist, I'll get those panned too, either to the left or the right. I just want to create space so that not everything's in the center, because that gives me a much better chance of actually hearing what's going on. So that's kind of it. You know, those are 3 different ways that you can monitor yourself in different situations, and then, you know, kind of some ground rules for getting a good in-ear mix and being able to hear everything on stage live. So if you liked the video, hit subscribe. Ding that notification bell, and then put in the comments, like, what do you think? What do you want in your in-ear mix? What are the most important things? What are the gotta have things that you put in your in-ears? What in-ears do you use? Do you use certain in-ears? Like, let's talk about it. I want to respond to your comments. I want to see what you guys are thinking, questions that you have, put them down there, and yeah, I'll see you in the next lesson.